Intentionality and reciprocity is the first parameter of the 12 parameters associated with Feuerstein's mediated learning experience. Intentionality and reciprocity is part of the universal criteria of MLE and therefore has to be present in each and every learning experience. We will use the following story to illustrate the meaning of intentionality and reciprocity. Susan Sorobe is a teacher in a public school. Like her colleagues, she faces challenges of overcrowded classes, too much curricular work, and many pupils that are disinterested in schoolwork, often due to extreme challenges at home. One day, the principal of her school asked her to accompany a grade 12 learner called Elizabeth to a science fair. Although Susan had her own family to take care of and felt drained by all the demands of teaching, she reluctantly agreed to go. At the science fair, Susan and Elizabeth felt very intimidated by the number of learners and teachers from prestigious schools. However, later that day, Susan met an elderly lady, Mrs. Tekete, who had been teaching science for more than 40 years. The company of this elderly woman immediately calmed her nerves. For the rest of the afternoon, Mrs. Tekete and Susan had a wonderful time together and shared many stories from their own lives as teachers. It was clear that both of them deeply cared about their students and the development of their unique potential. At the end of the afternoon, one of Mrs. Tekete's learners, Mpo, came to greet them. "I want you to meet Mrs. Sorobe because I want you to see that it is possible to become successful in life if you study hard and remain dedicated," Mrs. Tekete intentionally told Mpo. At that moment, Elizabeth also joined them. Mpo immediately reached out to Elizabeth in a friendly way and invited her to join their group of friends. Susan could immediately see how this warm gesture made Elizabeth more relaxed and at ease. That evening, the nerves got the better of Elizabeth, especially when she heard that the adjudicators will ask each participant questions about their specific science project. Mrs. Tekete and Mpo immediately stepped in to help, while Susan observed. It was as if Mrs. Tekete used a metaphorical magnifying glass to intentionally focus Elizabeth's attention on the most important scientific concepts and principles embedded in her science project, until Elizabeth's response gave her the assurance that she had taken her hand in the learning process. "I want you to hear this. Therefore, I'm saying it out loud. I want you to see this. That is why I'm putting my finger here," she would continue. Throughout the evening, Mrs. Tekete used her tone of voice, her body language, and gestures in many creative ways to keep Elizabeth engaged. At times, she deliberately steered the conversation towards Elizabeth's interests, her unique background, and needs. Sometimes she repeated essential words, and at times she even drew pictures to illustrate what she just explained. Like a skilled craftsman, Mrs. Tekete established a cycle of reciprocal engagement with Elizabeth. The following day, the exhibition hall was swamped by participants, parents, teachers, and adjudicators. Throughout the day, Elizabeth had to endure numerous rounds of questions from the adjudicators. With each round, more participants were eliminated. When the final round of questions started, Elizabeth leaned back to rest for a while against the table on which her science project was mounted, and in the process knocked the table over. Fortunately, she managed to catch the project just before it hit the ground, and she could reassemble everything just in time to face the final set of questions from the adjudicators. At the end of the day, Elizabeth, Mpo, Susan, and Mrs. Tekete huddled together to listen to the announcement of the winners. All four of them jumped and shouted with joy when it was announced that Elizabeth won the prize for the best science project in her category. While traveling back, Elizabeth received a phone call from an editor of a well-known science journal. He wanted to ask Elizabeth a few questions. Immediately she became anxious, wondering whether she would be able to answer yet another set of questions. However, the intentional way in which Mrs. Tikete prepared Elizabeth enabled her to answer all the questions of the editor with ease. As they reached the outskirts of their hometown, Susan and Elizabeth shared how much teachers and learners need one another to make any learning experience successful. Susan shared how teachers should intentionally focus the attention of their learners on the most important concepts and principles in the learning material, and Elizabeth shared how important it is for learners to take the teacher's hand and to stay engaged in the learning process. The following Monday, Susan walked back into her class, her very big class, full of excitement to continue with the intentional way of teaching she has learned from Mrs. Tikete. From this story, we can infer the following. Intentionality and reciprocity has two components. Firstly, intentional. This means that every learning experience has to be intentional. The teacher must know exactly what the learner should focus on and learn, and then deliberately steer the learner's attention to what is important. The teacher uses a metaphorical magnifying glass to focus the attention of the learner on the most essential concepts, principles, and features in the lesson material. Secondly, reciprocity. This means that a sense of mutual connection should be established between the teacher and the learner in each learning experience. Something that conveys the idea that they have taken hands and have become companions in the learning process. Here are 3 practical tips that teachers can use to apply intentionality and reciprocity in the classroom. Firstly, change yourself. Change your tone of voice, your language, or even your body language, and use gestures to focus the attention of learners. For example, I want you to hear this, therefore I'm saying it out loud. Or, I want you to understand how big this influence is, therefore I'm using my hands to demonstrate. Secondly, personalize the information. Try to connect the learning material to the interests, needs, and unique backgrounds of learners. For example, Johnny, you are a good soccer player, right? How do you think our lesson about acceleration applies to the game of soccer? Thirdly, change the format of the learning material. To keep students focused, change the learning material. Make it larger or smaller. Use repetition. Use rhyming. Or change it from words to pictures, or from words to physical objects and even experiences. For example, I'm writing this formula that is in your handbook with big letters on the board so that you can see it is very important. Or, I want you to experience firsthand what gravity is. Therefore, I ask that all of us participate in this experiment. I trust that you will be able to start applying intentionality and reciprocity in each learning experience in your classroom, and please let us know what you observe. For more information on intentionality and reciprocity and other helpful tools on better thinking and learning, please remember to visit our website at www.ilearnthinking.org.